I walked into the Grandview estate wearing my most elegant navy dress, the one I saved 3 months to buy. Derek's wedding was supposed to be perfect, and I wanted to look like I belonged with my successful older brother. But as the hostess led me past the marble columns and crystal chandeliers, past tables draped in ivory silk where my relatives sat laughing, she guided me straight through a swinging door into the industrial kitchen. There, between stainless steel counters and bustling catering staff, sat a lonely folding table with my name card. Standing in that kitchen, staring at my name scrawled on cheap cardstock, 3 years of memories crashed over me like a tidal wave. I remembered the day I announced my plans to start Atlas Construction Company from my garage. Derek had been sitting in our parents' living room fresh from his MBA program wearing that same condescending smile he perfected in childhood. Construction. He had laughed, not even looking up from his phone. "Simone, that's adorable. Really cute how you think you can build buildings. Maybe start with a dollhouse first." Mom had giggled nervously, while Dad just shook his head. "Derek's right, sweetheart. Why don't you find a nice office job, something more suitable for a young woman?" That was the beginning of the end for me and my family. Every Sunday dinner became a battleground where Derek would update everyone on his corporate achievements, while I sat silent about my struggling business. When I couldn't afford Christmas presents that year, Dad made a comment about how I should get serious about life instead of playing with tools. The worst part wasn't their lack of support. It was their active discouragement. When I needed a $5,000 loan to buy my first commercial vehicle, Derek told our parents I was throwing good money after bad ideas. When I worked 16-hour days and slept in my office to save rent money, Mom called it embarrassing behavior that reflects poorly on the family name. Derek met Brittany during my second year of business struggles. She was the daughter of prominent real estate developer Harrison Blake, and suddenly Derek had connections to the construction world he had mocked me for entering. At family gatherings, they would discuss real estate trends and building projects while pointedly excluding me from conversations about my own industry. The final blow came when Derek announced his engagement. The family threw an elaborate engagement party at an expensive country club. I received my invitation 3 days before the event, clearly an afterthought. When I arrived in my only decent dress, I discovered they hadn't reserved a seat for me at any table. I spent the evening standing near the bar, watching my family celebrate Derek's success while treating me like an unwelcome stranger. That night, I made a decision. I would prove my worth through actions, not words, but I would also test something crucial about my family. I deliberately kept my business success secret as Atlas Construction grew from a garage startup to a multi-million-dollar company. I wanted to see if they could love me without knowing about my wealth. I wanted to discover whether their rejection was about money or about me as a person. For 3 years, I watched Derek struggle with his own development company while I built an empire he never knew existed. I listened to him complain about contractor problems while my company solved identical issues for other clients. I sat through family dinners where he bragged about small deals while I had just signed contracts worth more than his annual revenue. Now, standing in this kitchen at his wedding, I finally had my answer about what my family truly valued. And the answer broke something inside me that I wasn't sure could ever be repaired. As I stood in the kitchen trying to process my emotions, something familiar caught my eye. The marble columns I could see through the service window weren't just expensive, they were specific. I had personally selected that exact Carrara marble 18 months ago, spending hours at the quarry to find pieces with perfect veining. My heart started racing as I looked around the kitchen with new eyes. The custom stainless steel fixtures, the imported Italian tile flooring, the hand-blown glass light fixtures. I knew every detail of this space because I had designed it during the Grandview estate renovation. This wasn't just any wedding venue Derek had chosen to impress his new in-laws. This was my project. My company had transformed this crumbling 19th century mansion into Chicago's most exclusive event space. A wave of bitter irony washed over me. Derek had unknowingly chosen to celebrate the most important day of his life in a building that existed only because of his despised sister's work. He had probably boasted to the Blake family about securing such a prestigious location, never realizing that his own sister had personally overseen every detail of its restoration. The catering manager, a kind woman named Patricia, whom I had worked with during the renovation, approached my table with a confused expression. She recognized me immediately, but clearly didn't understand why I was sitting among her staff instead of in the reception hall. "Miss Simone, I don't understand. Shouldn't you be with the wedding party? You're the bride's sister, right?" I shook my head gently. I'm the groom's sister, and apparently, this is where groom's sisters belong. Patricia's face flushed with embarrassment. There must be some mistake. I can speak with the wedding coordinator about getting you moved to the appropriate table. "No mistakes," I said quietly. "This is exactly where they want me." Through the service window, I watched Derek posing for pre-ceremony photos with Brittany and both sets of parents. He looked nervous, constantly checking his phone between shots. The photographer had to remind him multiple times to smile, and I noticed sweat beading on his forehead, despite the air conditioning I had personally designed for optimal comfort. During a break in the photo session, Derek stepped aside to take a phone call. I couldn't hear the conversation, but his body language told me everything I needed to know. His shoulders tensed, his free hand ran through his hair, and he paced in small circles. When he hung up, he immediately dialed another number, speaking in urgent whispers. Brittany noticed his distraction and approached with obvious irritation. "Derek, we have 300 guests arriving in 20 minutes. Whatever business crisis you're having can wait until after our honeymoon." "You don't understand," he replied, his voice carrying across the space between the kitchen and reception area. "The Atlas construction deal is falling apart. My business partner just called. They're reconsidering everything." My blood ran cold. Atlas Construction, my Atlas Construction. Derek's entire future depended on a contract with my company, and he had no idea his fate rested in the hands of the sister he had banished to eat with the kitchen staff. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my messages. Sure enough, there were several texts from my project managers about the Blake development contract. Derek Blake. I had never made the connection between my brother's fiancée and the Harrison Blake, whose company needed Atlas Construction to build their luxury condominium complex. The $30 million contract Derek desperately needed was sitting in my email inbox, waiting for my final approval. And my brother was about to discover that the success he craved depended entirely on the family member he had treated with the least respect. 20 minutes before the ceremony began, Brittany appeared in the kitchen doorway, wearing her elaborate white gown and an expression of pure disdain. She surveyed the catering staff with the air of someone inspecting servants, her gaze lingering disapprovingly on my navy dress. "I need to speak with the catering manager," she announced loudly. "There seems to be confusion about who belongs where during the ceremony." Patricia stepped forward professionally. "How can I help you, Mrs. Blake?" "It's Mrs. Mitchell now," Brittany corrected with obvious pleasure. "I want to make absolutely clear that kitchen staff are not permitted in the ceremony space under any circumstances. I don't care if some of you think you're friends with wedding guests. Today, you are hired help, and hired help stays in the kitchen." Her eyes locked directly on mine as she spoke those words. The message was unmistakably personal. She knew exactly who I was, and she was making sure I understood my place in the family hierarchy she now controlled. Patricia glanced at me uncertainly. "Ma'am, I think there might be some misunderstanding about our staffing arrangements." "No misunderstanding at all," Brittany replied smoothly. "I've been very clear about maintaining appropriate boundaries. The kitchen staff will remain in the kitchen. Security has been informed to enforce this policy." She swept out of the room, leaving behind an uncomfortable silence among the actual catering staff. They looked at me with sympathy and confusion, clearly recognizing that something was wrong, but uncertain how to address it. I spent the next 30 minutes watching Derek's wedding through the service windows, like some kind of ghost haunting my own family's celebration. The ceremony took place in the grand ballroom I had personally restored, where 250 guests sat in chairs I had helped select. Sunlight streamed through windows whose custom frames I had designed, casting rainbow patterns across marble floors I had personally approved. My parents sat in the front row, beaming with pride as their son married into one of Chicago's most prominent real estate families. Mom wore a lilac dress I had never seen, probably purchased specifically for this occasion, that was deemed too important for budget constraints. Dad had gotten a haircut and wore a new suit that actually fit properly. I caught glimpses of relatives I hadn't seen in years. Aunt Margaret wore her best jewelry and kept dabbing her eyes with an embroidered handkerchief. My cousins Tyler and Jordan sat with their own families, all dressed in their finest clothes for Derek's big day. None of them had even looked toward the kitchen when they arrived, let alone asked where I was sitting. The most painful moment came when the officiant asked about family blessings. Both sets of parents stood to offer words about love commitment and the joining of two families. Derek's eyes swept across the audience, acknowledging various relatives with nods and smiles. His gaze passed right over the service window, where I stood watching as if I didn't exist. During the exchange of rings, Derek's phone buzzed audibly in his jacket pocket. He tried to ignore it, but I could see the distraction in his face. The business crisis that threatened his future was intruding on his perfect day, and he had no idea that his salvation sat 30 feet away in the kitchen wearing a navy dress and watching his ceremony through a window meant for serving appetizers. When Derek kissed his bride and the audience erupted in applause, I felt something fundamental shift inside me. This wasn't just exclusion from a wedding. This was a declaration that I would never truly belong in my own family. No matter what I achieved, no matter how successful I became, I would always be the sister who belonged in the kitchen while everyone else celebrated in the ballroom. But Derek was about to learn that kitchens can be powerful places, especially when they're occupied by people who have the ability to change lives with a single phone call. The cocktail hour began immediately after the ceremony, and I watched from the kitchen as guests mingled in the elegant reception space I had designed. Waiters moved gracefully between clusters of well-dressed people carrying trays of appetizers and champagne. The sound of laughter and conversation drifted through the service doors, a reminder of the celebration I was excluded from joining. Patricia approached my table with a plate of the same appetizers being served to guests. "I saved you some of the good stuff," she said quietly. "The salmon tartare and those little pastry things you suggested when we planned the menu." I managed a weak smile. "Thank you, though I'm not sure I have much appetite right now." "This is wrong," Patricia said firmly. "I don't know what's going on with your family, but this is wrong. You helped design this menu. You know this space better than anyone out there." Through the window, I could see Derek working the room with nervous energy, shaking hands and accepting congratulations, while constantly checking his phone. Every few minutes, he would step aside to make or answer calls, his expression growing more strained with each conversation. Brittany held court near the bar, surrounded by her college sorority sisters and family friends. She gestured animatedly as she told stories occasionally, pointing toward different architectural features of the space. I caught fragments of her commentary as guests admired the restoration. "Harrison spent months finding the perfect venue," she was saying. "We wanted something with real elegance, not some cookie-cutter hotel ballroom. This place has such history and character." A guest commented on the beautiful marble work, and Brittany launched into a detailed explanation that was completely wrong. She credited the renovation to a famous Chicago firm that had nothing to do with the project, describing design choices that never existed and attributing the success to contractors who had never set foot in the building. I bit my tongue as she received praise for selecting a venue that existed only because of my vision and my company's craftsmanship. Every compliment she accepted was recognition that belonged to Atlas Construction and the team of skilled workers who had transformed this space from a crumbling mansion into a masterpiece. The most humiliating moment came when dinner was announced. Guests moved toward their assigned tables while I remained in the kitchen eating reheated appetizers off paper plates, while surrounded by industrial equipment and the constant bustle of catering staff. The contrast couldn't have been starker. Beyond the doors, my family dined on a carefully curated menu at tables draped in imported linens, while I sat on a folding chair next to a commercial dishwasher. As the first course was served in the main dining room, Brittany stood to make a toast. Her voice carried clearly through the service doors as she thanked various people for making their special day possible. "I want to thank all the vendors and staff who worked so hard to make tonight perfect," she announced, her voice full of false warmth. "From the florists to the photographers to our wonderful catering team working behind the scenes." Then she turned toward the kitchen and gestured in my direction. "And a special thanks to our little helper back there who's been so dedicated to making sure everything runs smoothly." The guests chuckled appreciatively, assuming she was making a sweet reference to a family friend who had volunteered to help with wedding preparations. They had no idea she was deliberately humiliating her new sister-in-law by referring to her as hired help. Several people I recognized from high school were among the guests. Sarah Chen and Michael Rodriguez had been in my advanced placement classes, and we had stayed in touch through social media over the years. They looked toward the kitchen with confusion when Brittany made her comment, clearly wondering why I would be working at Derek's wedding instead of sitting with family. The worst part was seeing my former English teacher, Mrs. Patterson, among the guests. She had been a mentor during high school, encouraging my writing and critical thinking skills. When she approached the kitchen after dinner to compliment the food, she was shocked to find me sitting among the catering staff. "Simone, what are you doing back here? I assumed you'd be at the head table with Derek and your parents." I forced a smile and lied smoothly. "Oh, I'm just helping Patricia coordinate a few things. You know how weddings can be. So much behind-the-scenes work to keep everything running perfectly." Mrs. Patterson looked confused but didn't press the issue. "Well, you always were one to pitch in where needed. Your parents must be so proud of both their children tonight." After she walked away, I sat in the industrial kitchen and wondered if there was a limit to how much humiliation one person could endure. But even as tears threatened to spill down my cheeks, Derek's business crisis was intensifying. Through the service window, I watched him step outside to take yet another urgent phone call his wedding day, turning into a nightmare of professional uncertainty. And I was the only person in the building who had the power to save him. As the main course was being served in the dining room, the kitchen staff began sharing gossip that made my blood run cold. Patricia and her team had worked several high-end events for the Blake family over the past year, and they had overheard conversations that painted a troubling picture of Derek's financial situation. That poor boy is drowning in debt," whispered Carmen, one of the veteran servers who had worked Chicago society events for decades. "His development company borrowed way more than they could afford to pay back. The banks are breathing down his neck." Another server. James nodded knowingly. "My cousin works at First National. He says Blake Development owes over $15 million in construction loans. They're 3 months behind on payments and facing foreclosure on their office building." I listened with growing alarm as the staff painted a picture of my brother's desperate circumstances. Derek had mortgaged everything to fund his luxury condominium project on the North Shore. He had promised investors returns based on the assumption that Atlas Construction would handle the building contract using connections through his marriage to the Blake family. The whole wedding venue choice was strategic," Patricia explained quietly. "Brittany's father recommended this place specifically because Atlas Construction renovated it. Derek's been telling investors he has inside connections to the company through his new wife's family network. My stomach dropped as I realized the full scope of Derek's miscalculation. He had built his entire business model around securing a contract with my company, never knowing that his despised sister actually owned Atlas Construction. He had spent months cultivating relationships and making promises based on family connections that didn't exist the way he imagined them. James returned from serving the salad course with more disturbing information. I heard the groom's business partner on the phone earlier. Apparently, Atlas Construction has been stalling on their decision for weeks. Without that $30 million contract, Blake Development will be bankrupt within 60 days. Carmen shook her head sympathetically. Such a shame. That young man seemed so confident when they booked this venue last year, kept talking about how this wedding would celebrate the beginning of his construction empire. I thought about the irony of Derek choosing this specific venue to impress Atlas Construction executives, not knowing his own sister had personally overseen every detail of its renovation. The marble columns he admired had been selected during my weekend trips to Vermont quarries. The crystal chandeliers he praised had been purchased after months of research into European lighting designers. The hand-carved woodwork he used to demonstrate his appreciation for craftsmanship had been installed by my personally trained crew. Patricia sat down beside me during a brief lull in service. Simone, I have to ask, what's really going on here? I've worked hundreds of weddings and I've never seen family dynamics this strange. Derek's been running around all day talking about Atlas Construction connections, but he acts like he barely knows you, and you're the CEO of Atlas Construction. The weight of keeping my secret suddenly felt unbearable. It's complicated, Patricia. My family doesn't know about my success. They've been excluding me for years because they think I'm a failure. I wanted to see if they could love me without knowing about my money. And what did you discover? Patricia asked gently. I gestured around the kitchen where I sat eating leftover food while my family celebrated in luxury 30 feet away. I think the answer is pretty clear. Through the service window, I watched Derek return from another frantic phone call, his face pale and drawn. He approached his business partner, Robert Chen, who had been invited to the wedding as both a guest and a crucial ally in securing the Atlas contract. Their conversation looked intense and worried, with Derek gesturing urgently while Robert shook his head grimly. Brittany noticed Derek's distraction and approached their table with obvious irritation. Even from the kitchen, I could see her sharp words and Derek's defensive responses. Their perfect wedding day was crumbling under the weight of business pressures that threatened to destroy everything Derek had worked to build. The final piece of devastating information came when Carmen returned from clearing the main course. She had overheard Robert Chen explaining the situation to another guest, unaware that his words were carrying to the kitchen staff. As Atlas Construction specifically requests detailed information about family values and company culture before approving major contracts, Carmen reported. They want to know they're partnering with people who share their commitment to treating workers and family members with respect. My heart started racing as I understood the full implications. Atlas Construction. My company had developed a reputation for ethical business practices and strong family values. We specifically sought partners who demonstrated integrity in all their relationships, personal and professional. The vetting process for major contracts included background research into how potential partners treated their employees, their communities, and their own families. Derek had been trying to secure a $30 million contract with a company that prioritized family values while simultaneously treating his own sister as hired help at his wedding. The irony was almost too painful to comprehend. Patricia looked at me with growing understanding. Simone, you have the power to save your brother's business, but after the way your family has treated you tonight, why would you even consider helping him? I stared through the service window at Derek, who was now pacing nervously near the bar, while frantically texting on his phone. 3 years of memories flooded through my mind, every dismissive comment, every missed birthday. every family gathering where I was treated as an embarrassment rather than an achievement. The sister who had built a construction empire from nothing, who had created jobs for hundreds of people, who had restored historic buildings and contributed to her community, was sitting in a kitchen eating leftovers while her family celebrated 30 feet away. But Derek was still my brother, and in a few minutes he was about to face the consequences of years of choices that had brought him to this moment of crisis. The question was whether I would be his salvation or his reckoning. Just as dessert was being served in the main dining room, Patricia burst through the kitchen doors with an expression of pure shock. She had been coordinating with the venue's event manager when 3 unexpected guests arrived at the reception. "Simone," she whispered urgently, "Atlas Construction executives are here. They just walked into the reception hall wearing business suits and looking for Derek. They said something about wanting to meet his family before finalizing a major contract." My blood turned to ice. I knew exactly who they were. Marcus Thompson, my chief operations officer, Linda Rodriguez, my head of project development, and David Kim, my director of business partnerships. I had mentioned Derek's wedding to them weeks ago, never imagining they would decide to attend as surprise guests to evaluate our potential partnership with Blake Development. Through the service window, I watched Derek's face transform from confusion to panic as Marcus approached him with a professional smile. Derek clearly hadn't expected Atlas executives to attend his wedding, and he was completely unprepared for the impromptu business evaluation that was about to unfold. "Mr. Blake," Marcus said loudly enough for nearby guests to hear, "congratulations on your special day. We thought it would be wonderful to meet your family and see how you celebrate important milestones. Atlas Construction values partnerships with people who prioritize strong family relationships." Derek stammered through a response, clearly trying to appear confident while his business future hung in the balance. "Of course, absolutely. Family is everything to us. We're all very close and supportive of each other's endeavors." Linda stepped forward with the warm but professional demeanor I knew so well. "We're particularly interested in meeting your sister. We understand she's been very supportive of your career in construction and development. Family bonds often predict business relationships." The color drained from Derek's face entirely. He glanced around the reception hall desperately, as if he could somehow make a sister materialize from thin air. I watched him realize that he had spent years telling people he was essentially an only child, never mentioning me in his business presentations or family discussions. "My sister she's actually..." Derek struggled to form coherent words while Brittany moved closer with a concerned expression. "Oh, Derek's sister couldn't make it tonight," Brittany interjected smoothly. "She's traveling for work. International business, you know how it is. Very demanding schedule." David looked genuinely disappointed. "That's unfortunate. We specifically wanted to meet her. Our research indicated she's been instrumental in Derek's understanding of the construction industry." I nearly laughed out loud from my position in the kitchen. Their research came from Derek's own business proposals, where he had apparently inflated his family connections to the construction world without realizing he was describing his actual sister's achievements. Marcus frowned slightly. "Our preliminary discussions suggested Derek's sister has significant experience in construction management. We were hoping to discuss potential collaboration opportunities that could benefit all parties." Derek's panic was now visible to everyone nearby. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the climate-controlled environment, and his hands shook slightly as he reached for his champagne glass. She really is incredibly busy with her own projects, huge responsibility, major decisions. You understand how it is in our industry. "Certainly," Linda replied, but her tone had shifted to something cooler and more evaluative. "Family support systems are crucial in our business. We find that people who maintain strong family relationships tend to be more trustworthy partners." Through the kitchen doors, I watched my Atlas construction colleagues continue their impromptu evaluation of Derek's character and family values. They had no idea I was 30 feet away, eating leftover wedding cake while listening to my brother lie about our relationship. The conversation took an even more uncomfortable turn when David asked about Derek's broader family dynamics. We'd love to meet your parents as well. Atlas Construction believes that multi-generational family support creates the strongest business foundations. Derek gestured toward our parents' table where Mom and Dad were finishing their dessert and looking blissfully unaware of the business crisis unfolding nearby. Of course, I'd be happy to introduce you. They're incredibly proud of both their children's achievements. As Derek led the Atlas executives toward our parents, Brittany grabbed his arm with obvious concern. I couldn't hear their whispered conversation, but her body language suggested she was questioning his decision to involve more family members in what was clearly becoming a disastrous business evaluation. Patricia appeared at my side with a fresh cup of coffee. "This is getting interesting," she murmured. "Your colleagues don't seem impressed with Derek's family presentation." I watched Marcus, Linda, and David interact with my parents, asking polite questions about their children's careers and family relationships. Mom and Dad beamed with pride as they discussed Derek's business ventures, but I could see confusion in their faces when the executives asked about their daughter's construction experience. "Oh, Simone," Dad said with a dismissive chuckle that carried clearly across the reception hall. "She's been playing around with some little construction projects. Nice hobby for her, but Derek is the real businessman in the family." Linda exchanged a meaningful glance with Marcus. In all their years working for Atlas Construction, they had never heard anyone describe their CEO's work as playing around or hobby projects. The final blow came when Mom added, "Simone means well, but she's always been a bit of a dreamer. Derek is the practical one who understands how business really works." I watched my Atlas Construction executives process this information with growing alarm. They were evaluating Derek based partly on his family's support and respect for his sister's construction work. Instead, they were discovering a family that dismissed their own CEO's achievements and treated her industry expertise as irrelevant. Derek's desperation was becoming more obvious by the minute. He kept glancing toward the kitchen as if he sensed that his salvation might somehow come from the service area he had banished me to. But he had no idea that the person with the power to save his business was sitting 20 feet away, watching his carefully constructed lies collapse in real time. Marcus stepped away from the group to make a private phone call, and I knew exactly who he was calling. My personal cell phone, which sat silent on the kitchen table because I was too emotionally drained to check messages. The Atlas Construction leadership team was about to discover that their CEO was not traveling internationally for business. She was sitting in a wedding kitchen, excluded from her own brother's celebration. My phone buzzed against the steel table surface, the vibration echoing through the industrial kitchen like a dinner bell. Marcus's name appeared on the screen, and I could see him through the service window, standing near the bar, with his phone pressed to his ear. The irony was almost too painful to process. My own employee was calling me while standing 30 feet away at my brother's wedding, completely unaware that I was watching him. I let the call go to voicemail, my hand trembling slightly as I set the phone back down. Patricia noticed my distress and moved closer, her voice gentle but urgent. "Simone, whatever you're planning to do, you need to decide quickly. Those executives look like they're losing patience with Derek's story." Through the window, I could see the Atlas Construction team huddled in conversation near the entrance to the reception hall. Their body language suggested concern and confusion. Linda kept glancing at her own phone, probably trying to reach me through our company's emergency contact system. Derek approached their group with obvious desperation, his wedding reception transforming into a high-stakes business negotiation that he was clearly losing. Brittany trailed behind him, her white dress and forced smile creating a surreal contrast to the professional crisis unfolding on her wedding day. "Or gentlemen, ladies," Derek said with false confidence that fooled no one. "I'm sure we can arrange a phone call with my sister sometime next week. Her schedule is extremely demanding, as I'm sure you understand." David's response was polite but firm. "Mr. Blake, Atlas Construction's contract approval process requires family verification meetings. We don't proceed with major partnerships without understanding the full family dynamic. Your sister's input is essential to our decision." I watched Derek's face cycle through emotions, panic, frustration, and finally a desperate kind of anger that I recognized from our childhood. It was the same expression he wore when his lies were discovered and consequences loomed. He was realizing that his entire business future depended on the cooperation of the family member he had systematically excluded and dismissed for 3 years. The catering staff around me had stopped their cleanup work to watch the drama unfolding in the reception hall. Carmen shook her head sympathetically, while James whispered updates to Patricia about the increasingly tense conversation between Derek and the Atlas executives. "This is like watching a train wreck in slow motion," Carmen murmured. "That poor boy has no idea how badly he's messed up." My phone buzzed again. This time it was Linda calling, and I could see her standing near the windows, her expression growing more concerned with each unanswered ring. The Atlas construction team was beginning to realize that something was seriously wrong with Derek's story about his sister's availability and international travel schedule. I thought about all the years of family gatherings where Derek had dismissed my dreams and ambitions. Every Christmas where he received thoughtful gifts while I was forgotten. Every birthday celebration where my achievements were ignored while his mediocre accomplishments were celebrated. Every family photo where I was positioned on the edge or excluded entirely. The kitchen doors swung open and James appeared with more devastating intelligence from the reception hall. "The Atlas executives are asking other family members about Derek's sister. They want to understand why nobody seems to know details about her construction work." My stomach clenched as I imagined my relatives struggling to answer questions about career achievements they had never bothered to learn about. Aunt Margaret probably couldn't even remember what company I worked for. My cousins Tyler and Jordan had never asked about my business, treating my professional life as if it were an embarrassing hobby rather than a successful enterprise. Through the service window, I watched Marcus approach my parents again, this time with more specific questions. I couldn't hear the conversation, but I could see Mom's confused expression as she tried to explain her daughter's career to executives who clearly knew more about my work than she did. Dad's dismissive hand gestures suggested he was downplaying my achievements again, probably describing Atlas Construction as some small local business rather than the multi-million-dollar company that employed over 200 people. The disconnect between reality and my family's perception of my success was becoming painfully obvious to the Atlas executives. Patricia sat down across from me, her expression a mixture of sympathy and amazement. "Simone, I've never seen anything like this. Your own family doesn't even know what you've accomplished. How is that possible?" "Because I wanted to be loved for who I am, what I own," I replied quietly. I thought if I kept my success secret, I could determine whether they valued me as a person. Tonight, I have my answer. My phone buzzed with a text message from David. "Emergency situation at Blake wedding. Cannot reach you. Family claims you're traveling internationally, but something feels wrong. Need immediate guidance on contract approval." I stared at the message for a long moment, feeling the weight of Derek's future in my hands. With a single phone call, I could save his business and preserve his marriage. Or I could let him face the consequences of 3 years of dismissive treatment and deliberate exclusion. Carmen approached with a fresh plate of dessert. "Honey, whatever decision you're wrestling with, make it based on who you want to be, not who they've been. Revenge might feel good for a moment, but forgiveness lasts a lifetime." Through the window, I watched Derek's increasingly frantic attempts to convince the Atlas executives to proceed without meeting his sister. His wedding day was disintegrating into a business catastrophe, and he had no idea that his salvation sat 30 feet away in the kitchen he had banished me to. I picked up my phone and began composing a message that would change everything. I stood up from the folding table, smoothing my navy dress and checking my reflection in the stainless steel refrigerator door. After 3 years of hiding my success and 3 hours of enduring humiliation, the moment of truth had finally arrived. Patricia watched me with growing understanding as I walked toward the kitchen doors. "You're going to tell them, aren't you?" "I'm going to end this charade," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt inside. I pushed through the swinging doors and walked calmly across the reception hall toward Derek and the Atlas construction executives. Conversation slowed as guests noticed my movement from the service area to the main floor. Some looked confused about why kitchen staff was approaching the wedding party. Others recognized me as Derek's sister and wondered why I had been absent from the celebration. Derek was in the middle of an increasingly desperate explanation about my fictional international travel when he noticed my approach. His words stopped mid-sentence as our eyes met for the first time all evening. The expression on his face cycled rapidly from confusion to recognition to something approaching terror. "Derek," I said calmly, my voice carrying clearly across the reception hall, "I believe there are some people here who want to meet me." Marcus, Linda, and David turned toward my voice with visible relief. They had been growing more concerned about the inconsistencies in Derek's story, and my sudden appearance seemed to resolve their confusion. "Simone!" Marcus exclaimed with genuine warmth. "We've been trying to reach you all evening. Derek told us you were traveling internationally, but your phone has been going straight to voicemail." Derek's face had gone completely white. He stared at me with growing horror as he began to understand the implications of my presence and the familiar way the Atlas executives greeted me. "I've been here all evening," I replied, my gaze fixed directly on Derek's terrified eyes. "In the kitchen, actually. That's where Derek and Brittany decided I belonged for their wedding celebration." A murmur of confusion rippled through the nearby guests. The Atlas executives looked bewildered, clearly trying to process why Derek's sister would be assigned to kitchen duties at her own brother's wedding. Linda stepped forward with professional concern. "I'm sorry, I don't understand. Derek has been telling us about his close family relationships and strong support system. Why would you be working in the kitchen?" "I wasn't working," I said clearly, making sure my voice carried to the relatives who had ignored me all evening. "I was seated there. Apparently, that's where the family decided I should eat dinner, with the hired help." The silence that followed was deafening. Brittany appeared at Derek's side, her face flushed with embarrassment as she realized the magnitude of their miscalculation. My parents approached from their table, finally beginning to understand that something significant was happening. Derek found his voice, but it came out as a desperate whisper. "Simone, I can explain. There was confusion with the seating arrangements. Wedding planning is so complicated and—" "Derek," I interrupted quietly, "would you like to tell your business partners from Atlas Construction about our family relationships? Or should I explain how well you treat the people closest to you?" The color drained completely from Derek's face as the final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. Marcus, Linda, and David looked between us with growing comprehension and alarm. David spoke first, his voice carefully controlled. "I'm sorry. Are you suggesting that Derek has been lying about his relationship with you?" "Not lying exactly," I replied, maintaining eye contact with Derek, "just dramatically mischaracterizing the reality of our family dynamics. Derek has spent the past 3 years dismissing my career as a hobby and treating my business achievements as embarrassing failures. Tonight he seated me in the kitchen with the catering staff because he and Brittany felt that's where I belonged." Marcus looked genuinely shocked. But Derek's entire proposal was built around family connections to the construction industry. He specifically mentioned his sister's expertise and support. Yes, I said calmly. That was interesting to learn because Derek has never once asked about my work or shown any interest in my career. In fact, he's actively discouraged family members from taking my business seriously. The Atlas executives exchanged meaningful glances that I recognized from years of working together. They were evaluating Derek's character in real time and finding it seriously lacking. Brittany stepped forward desperately. This is all a misunderstanding. Simone, you know we value you. The seating arrangement was just Brittany, I said firmly, you told me the help eats in the kitchen less than 4 hours ago. You instructed security to keep kitchen staff out of the ceremony. You made sure I knew exactly how you viewed my place in this family. A collective gasp arose from the nearby guests who were beginning to understand the scope of the family drama unfolding before them. My former high school classmates looked horrified. Mrs. Patterson appeared genuinely shocked by the revelation. Derek's business partner, Robert Chen, approached the group with obvious concern. Derek, what's going on here? You told me your sister was fully supportive of the Atlas partnership. I turned to address Robert directly. I'm very curious about that as well, Robert. Derek has never mentioned Atlas Construction to me, despite apparently building his entire business model around securing a contract with the company. Linda stepped closer, her voice taking on the professional tone I knew meant serious business evaluation was occurring. Simone, can you clarify your relationship with Atlas Construction? Derek's proposals suggested significant family involvement in the industry. I looked directly at Derek, whose terror had now transformed into complete devastation as he realized what I was about to reveal. I don't just have a relationship with Atlas Construction, I said, clearly making sure every guest in the reception hall could hear. I am Atlas Construction. I founded the company 3 years ago, and I am the CEO who will decide whether Derek's business proposal is approved or rejected. The silence that followed was so complete that the only sound came from the air conditioning system I had personally designed for optimal comfort in this space. Derek's legs nearly gave out beneath him as the full scope of his situation became clear. His entire future depended on the approval of the sister he had banished to eat in the kitchen at his own wedding. The transformation in the reception hall was immediate and absolute. 300 wedding guests who had been laughing and celebrating moments before now stood in stunned silence, processing the revelation that had just shattered every assumption about family dynamics and business relationships. Marcus, Linda, and David looked at me with expressions ranging from shock to profound disappointment in Derek. They had spent years working under my leadership, implementing company policies that prioritized respect, integrity, and strong family values. Witnessing their CEO treated as hired help at her own brother's wedding violated everything Atlas Construction stood for. Ms. Harrison, Marcus said formally, using my professional title to emphasize the gravity of the situation, we had no idea you were present at this event, much less that you had been excluded from the family celebration. The use of my business name sent another ripple of shock through the crowd. Several guests pulled out their phones, clearly searching for information about Atlas Construction and its CEO. The company had been featured in Chicago Business Journal numerous times, and my profile was easily findable online. Brittany's sorority sisters huddled together near the bar, whispering frantically as they realized the magnitude of their friend's miscalculation. The woman they had watched being treated as kitchen staff was actually one of Chicago's most successful young business owners, and they had witnessed her systematic humiliation by her own family. My parents approached slowly, their faces pale with growing understanding of what they had missed about their daughter's life. Dad's dismissive comments about my hobby projects suddenly took on devastating significance when viewed in the context of my actual achievements. Simone? Mom whispered, her voice barely audible above the shocked murmur of guests. You own Atlas Construction, the company Derek has been trying to partner with. Why? For 3 years, Mom, I replied calmly, while you and Dad were telling me to find a real job and stop embarrassing the family. I was building a multi-million-dollar business that employs over 200 people. Aunt Margaret approached with tears in her eyes, finally understanding why I had been absent from family gatherings. Sweetheart, we had no idea. Why didn't you tell us about your success? I wanted to see if you could love me without knowing about my money, I answered honestly. I thought if I kept my achievements secret, I could determine whether our family relationships were based on genuine affection or financial status. Tonight provided my answer. Robert Chen stepped forward with obvious distress. Derek, your entire business plan was built around Atlas Construction connections. How could you not know your own sister owned the company? Derek opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. He stood frozen between his wedding party and the Atlas executives, his face a mask of terror and dawning comprehension. Everything he had worked for, everything he had promised investors, every dream he had shared with Brittany about their future together, depended on the approval of the sister he had treated with contempt for 3 years. Linda addressed me directly, her voice carefully professional. Ms. Harrison, given what we've witnessed tonight regarding family dynamics and character evaluation, I think we need to discuss the status of Blake Development's contract proposal. The mention of the contract sent visible panic through Derek's wedding party. Brittany grabbed her new husband's arm, her elaborate white dress suddenly seeming less like celebration attire and more like a costume for a tragedy. Please, Derek finally found his voice. Simone, I know I've made mistakes. I know our family hasn't treated you the way we should have, but please don't let my business failures destroy Brittany's future too. She doesn't deserve to pay for my stupidity. I looked at Brittany, remembering her cruel words about the help eating in the kitchen. Brittany made her own choices tonight. She had multiple opportunities to treat me with basic human dignity, and she chose cruelty instead. David stepped forward with the formal demeanor that meant serious business decisions were being made. Ms. Harrison, Atlas Construction has strict policies about partnering with companies that don't share our values regarding respect and integrity. What we've witnessed tonight raises significant concerns about Blake Development's character and ethics. The weight of the moment settled over the reception hall like a thick blanket. Wedding guests realized they were witnessing not just family drama, but a business crisis that would determine the financial future of multiple families. Derek's investors were probably among the guests now, watching their potential returns evaporate in real time. Patricia appeared at my side, having emerged from the kitchen with several other staff members. Ms. Simone? She said clearly, making sure her voice carried across the reception hall. The kitchen staff wanted you to know how proud they are to work for someone who built Atlas Construction with such integrity and respect for working people. Her words emphasized the contrast between my treatment of employees and my family's treatment of me. The catering staff beamed with genuine pride for their CEO, while my own relatives stood in shocked silence, processing their years of dismissive behavior toward someone they had completely underestimated. Marcus approached Derek directly, his expression stern and businesslike. Mr. Blake, Atlas Construction's preliminary contract offer was based partly on your representations about family support and strong character references. Given tonight's revelations about your treatment of family members, we need to reassess our partnership evaluation. Derek looked like he might collapse entirely. 3 years of work, millions of dollars in potential revenue, and his entire professional reputation hung in the balance. His wedding day had become the day of reckoning for every cruel comment, every dismissive gesture, and every choice to exclude his sister from family celebrations. The question now was whether I would choose justice or mercy, revenge or reconciliation. And the entire reception hall waited in silence to discover what kind of leader Atlas Construction really had. The moment Derek's professional crisis became undeniable, my family's behavior underwent a transformation so swift and complete, it would have been comical if it weren't so pathetically transparent. The same relatives who had ignored me for hours suddenly remembered they had a daughter, sister, and niece named Simone. Mom was the first to break from the shocked crowd, tears streaming down her face as she approached with arms outstretched. "Simone, honey, I'm so sorry. I had no idea about your success. We've been so proud of you all along, but we just didn't understand the scope of your achievements." The lie was so blatant it took my breath away. 3 hours earlier, she had walked past the kitchen without acknowledging my existence. Now, she was claiming pride in accomplishments she had actively discouraged and achievements she had consistently dismissed as unrealistic dreams. Dad followed close behind his face, flushed with embarrassment and desperate calculation. "Sweetheart, you have to understand, we were just worried about you taking on such a big challenge. We wanted to protect you from disappointment. But look how wrong we were. You've exceeded all our expectations." I stared at him in disbelief. "Dad, last Christmas you told me to stop playing with construction toys and find a real career. You said my business was an embarrassment to the family name. That was 8 months after Atlas Construction had already secured $15 million in contracts." Aunt Margaret pushed through the crowd of relatives, her voice thick with false emotion. "Oh, Simone, darling, I always knew you were destined for greatness. Remember when you were little and you built those elaborate structures with blocks? I told your mother then that you had natural engineering talent." The revisionist history was breathtaking. Aunt Margaret had never shown interest in my childhood activities, and she had spent the past 3 years making excuses to avoid family gatherings where I might discuss my work. Now she was claiming prescient recognition of talents she had never acknowledged. My cousins Tyler and Jordan approached together, their expressions a mixture of shame and opportunistic calculation. Tyler spoke first, his voice carefully modulated to sound supportive rather than desperate. "Simone, we owe you a huge apology. We've been so caught up in our own lives that we didn't pay enough attention to what you were building. Jordan and I were just talking about how impressive it is that you created such a successful company while we were complaining about our corporate jobs." Jordan nodded enthusiastically. "Absolutely. We should have been more supportive family members. Actually, Tyler's been thinking about career changes, and I was wondering if Atlas Construction might have opportunities for experienced project managers." The shamelessness was staggering. 5 minutes ago, they had been part of the family dynamic that excluded me from meaningful conversations and celebrations. Now they were positioning themselves as loving relatives while simultaneously job hunting at my wedding reception confrontation. Brittany's transformation was perhaps the most dramatic of all. The bride who had sneered about the help eating in the kitchen now approached with trembling hands and desperate eyes, her white dress suddenly seeming like a flag of surrender rather than celebration. "Simone," she whispered urgently, "I made a terrible mistake tonight. I was stressed about wedding details and took it out on you inappropriately. I hope you can understand that weddings make people act irrationally. I would never normally treat family members that way." The attempt to blame wedding stress for deliberate cruelty was insulting to both our intelligence. Brittany had made calculated choices about how to treat me, from the kitchen seating assignment to the public humiliation during her toast. Her behavior reflected core values, not temporary stress. Robert Chen appeared at Derek's side, his face grave with concern for their business partnership. "Derek, we need to discuss damage control immediately. Our investors are going to hear about this situation, and we need a strategy for salvaging the Atlas relationship." Derek looked like a man watching his entire world collapse in slow motion. The brother who had spent 3 years dismissing my dreams was now faced with the reality that his own future depended entirely on my goodwill and forgiveness. "Simone," he said, his voice hoarse with desperation, I know I've been a terrible brother. I know our family has treated you badly, but please, I'm begging you, don't let my mistakes destroy everything. Brittany and I want children someday. Our future depends on this contract. The emotional manipulation was stunning in its transparency. Derek was essentially arguing that I should save his business because he planned to have children who might suffer from his professional failures. He was using hypothetical future family members to guilt me into overlooking years of actual mistreatment of current family members. Marcus, Linda, and David watched this family drama unfold with expressions ranging from disgust to professional fascination. They had never seen such a clear illustration of why Atlas Construction's character evaluation process was essential for identifying trustworthy business partners. Patricia emerged from the kitchen with several other staff members, all wearing expressions of fierce loyalty. "Ms. Simone," she announced loudly enough for the entire reception to hear, "the Atlas construction team wanted you to know that we've prepared a special dessert presentation in your honor. It seemed appropriate to celebrate our CEO properly." Her gesture was both touching and strategically brilliant. The kitchen staff was demonstrating more respect and appreciation for my achievements than my own family had shown in 3 years. The contrast was unmistakable and damning. Mrs. Patterson, my former high school teacher, approached with tears in her eyes and genuine emotion that stood out sharply against the calculating desperation of my relatives. "Simone, I had no idea you had built such an impressive company. I remember your essays about wanting to create something meaningful and lasting. You've exceeded every dream you shared in my classroom." Her authentic pride and recognition felt like a balm against the sting of family rejection. She had remembered and valued my aspirations when my own parents had forgotten or dismissed them. The Atlas executives moved into a private consultation near the bar, their body language suggesting serious deliberation about Derek's future. They kept glancing toward me clearly, waiting for guidance about how to proceed with a contract evaluation that had become exponentially more complicated. Derek noticed their conversation and approached me with panic written across his face. "Simone, please, tell me what I need to do to fix this. Tell me how to make amends for the way we've treated you. I'll do anything apologize to anyone. Just please don't destroy my future because of my past mistakes." The moment had arrived when I would need to decide not just Derek's fate, but what kind of person I wanted to be, in response to years of family cruelty. The power to save or destroy him rested entirely in my hands, and 300 wedding guests waited to discover whether I would choose justice or mercy. The reception hall fell into complete silence as I walked toward the center of the room, positioning myself where every guest could see and hear my decision. The Atlas construction executives stood ready to implement whatever choice I made, while Derek's entire wedding party watched with expressions ranging from desperate hope to resigned terror. I looked around the room at faces I had known my entire life. Relatives who had celebrated Derek's mediocre achievements while ignoring my extraordinary ones. Family friends who had participated in the systematic exclusion that brought us to this moment. Wedding guests who had witnessed the cruelty and were now eager to see its resolution. Thus, 3 years ago, I began my voice carrying clearly across the marble floors I had personally selected. I started Atlas Construction with $500 a used truck and a dream that most of you told me was unrealistic. Derek laughed at my business plan. Dad said I was embarrassing the family. Mom suggested I find a nice office job instead of playing with tools. Derek's face was ashen as I recounted the family history he probably hoped I had forgotten. Brittany stood beside him in her elaborate dress, finally understanding the full scope of consequences for their treatment of me. I could have given up when banks refused my loan applications because I was too young and inexperienced. I could have quit when I worked 18-hour days for 6 months straight, sleeping in my office to save money on rent. I could have abandoned my dreams when family gatherings became exercises in humiliation where my struggles were treated as entertainment. My parents stood frozen near their table, recognizing their own words and actions in my recitation of Atlas Construction's early challenges. The pride they now claimed to feel was conspicuously absent during the years when encouragement might have mattered. Instead, I built something extraordinary. Atlas Construction now employs 230 people. We've completed over 50 major projects across 3 states. We've contributed millions of dollars to local economies and created apprenticeship programs that train skilled workers for careers in construction. The company has been profitable every quarter for 2.5 years. The wedding guests absorbed this information with visible amazement. Several pulled out phones to research Atlas Construction, probably discovering awards, newspaper articles, and business recognitions they had never bothered to learn about when I tried to share my achievements during family gatherings. Derek's Blake Development Company submitted a proposal for a $30 million contract to build luxury condominiums on the North Shore. The project would be the largest in Atlas Construction's history and would establish Blake Development as a major player in Chicago real estate. Derek's business partner, Robert Chen, looked like he might faint as the full financial scope became clear to everyone present. The contract wasn't just important to Derek's future, it represented generational wealth that could transform multiple families. Atlas Construction has strict policies about business partnerships. We only work with companies that demonstrate integrity, respect for workers, and strong ethical foundations. Our due diligence process includes evaluation of how potential partners treat their own family members because we believe family relationships predict business relationships. Marcus, Linda, and David nodded in agreement, their expressions reflecting years of experience with Atlas Construction's character-based evaluation system. They had seen how family dysfunction translated into business problems and how ethical compromises in personal life carried over into professional settings. Tonight, Derek demonstrated his character by seating his sister in the kitchen with hired help while he entertained business prospects in the luxury space she had personally designed. Brittany showed her values by publicly humiliating a family member and referring to her as the help. My parents revealed their priorities by dismissing their daughter's achievements while celebrating their son's mediocrity. The truth was devastating precisely because it was undeniable. 300 witnesses had observed the family dynamics that led to this moment, and no amount of revisionist history could change what everyone had seen. Derek stepped forward, his voice breaking with emotion. "Simone, I know I've failed as a brother. I know our family has failed you in ways that are unforgivable, but please, I'm asking for a chance to prove that we can change. Give me the opportunity to become the brother you deserved all along." His plea was heartfelt, but it came 3 years too late and under circumstances that made sincerity difficult to evaluate. Was Derek genuinely remorseful, or was he simply terrified of losing everything he had worked to build? I looked at the Atlas executives who were waiting for my decision about Derek's future. I thought about the kitchen staff who had shown me more respect in one evening than my family had demonstrated in 3 years. I considered the 230 employees whose livelihoods depended on the Atlas Construction's reputation and ethical standards. "Marcus, Linda, David," I said, formally addressing my colleagues with the professional respect they deserved. "Blake Development's contract proposal will move forward as planned." The collective gasp from the reception hall was audible. Derek's knees nearly buckled with relief, while Brittany began crying tears that seemed to contain equal parts gratitude and shame. However, I continued raising my voice to ensure everyone understood the conditions. The partnership will proceed under new terms that reflect Atlas Construction's values and Blake Development's need for character rehabilitation. Derek straightened with wary hope, understanding that his salvation came with prices he hadn't yet learned about. The wedding guests leaned forward, eager to hear what justice would look like in this extraordinary situation. First, Derek will issue a public statement acknowledging his sister's business achievements and apologizing for years of dismissive treatment. The statement will appear in Chicago Business Journal and will specifically credit Atlas Construction's role in developing Blake Development's project management capabilities. The requirement for public humility was the inverse of Derek's years of private cruelty. He would need to celebrate my success as prominently as he had dismissed my struggles. Second, Brittany will personally apologize to every member of the catering staff for her behavior tonight, and Blake Development will make a substantial donation to a fund supporting dignified treatment of service workers. Brittany's face flushed with embarrassment, but she nodded at acceptance of terms that would require her to acknowledge her cruelty to people she had considered beneath her notice. Third, the entire family will attend Atlas Construction's annual charity gala as my personal guests, where they will publicly support our foundation's work, providing scholarships for women in construction trades. This condition would force my family to celebrate my achievements in front of Chicago's business community, transforming years of private shame into public pride. Finally, Blake Development will donate 5% of the project's profits to establish the Simone Harrison Scholarship Fund, supporting young women who want to enter construction and engineering fields despite family discouragement. The scholarship fund would ensure that Derek's future success contributed to empowering other women facing similar challenges, creating something positive from the pain of family rejection. Derek accepted all conditions without hesitation, his relief at avoiding complete catastrophe overwhelming any concerns about public embarrassment or financial costs. He had expected destruction and received redemption, albeit with significant requirements for character growth. The Atlas executives approached to discuss implementation details, their expressions reflecting cautious optimism about the amended partnership. They had witnessed both the problem and its proposed solution, giving them confidence that Blake Development might become the kind of partner Atlas Construction could respect. But the real test would come in the months ahead when Derek would need to prove that his gratitude was genuine and his commitment to change was lasting. The transformation in the reception hall's atmosphere was immediate and profound. What had been a wedding celebration turned family crisis was now becoming a masterclass in accountability redemption and the power of conditional second chances. Derek approached the Atlas executives with newfound humility. His entire demeanor changed from the desperate businessman who had been lying about family connections minutes earlier. "Marcus, Linda, David," he said respectfully, "I want you to know that I understand the gravity of what happened here tonight. I'm grateful for Simone's mercy, and I'm committed to earning your trust and respect through actions, not words." Marcus responded with cautious professionalism. "Mr. Blake, Atlas Construction's decision to proceed is based entirely on your sister's leadership and judgment. We'll be monitoring the partnership closely to ensure that Blake Development's future actions align with the values you've committed to demonstrating." Linda stepped forward with a tablet containing the modified contract terms. "We'll need written confirmation of all conditions within 48 hours, including detailed timelines for public statements, staff apologies, and scholarship fund establishment. Atlas Construction doesn't proceed with partnerships based on verbal promises made under pressure." The business-like efficiency emphasized that my mercy came with strict accountability measures. Derek would need to prove his character transformation through documented actions, not emotional promises made in a moment of crisis. Brittany approached the catering staff with visible nervousness, her elaborate wedding dress suddenly seeming inappropriate for the humble apologies she needed to deliver. Patricia watched with professional dignity as the bride who had earlier sneered at the help prepared to acknowledge her cruelty. "Now, Patricia," Brittany began, her voice shaking with embarrassment, "I owe you and your entire team a sincere apology for my behavior tonight. There's no excuse for treating anyone with disrespect, especially people who work so hard to make special occasions perfect for others. Patricia accepted the apology graciously while maintaining her professional composure. Mrs. Mitchell, we appreciate your recognition of our work. The catering industry requires mutual respect between all parties to function effectively. James stepped forward representing the serving staff. Ma'am, we want you to know that treating workers with dignity creates better experiences for everyone. When staff feels respected, we provide exceptional service because we want to, not because we have to. Carmen added her perspective as the most senior staff member present. Young lady, how you treat people when you think they can't affect your life reveals your true character. Tonight taught all of us important lessons about judging others based on their positions rather than their worth. The staff's responses demonstrated grace while delivering pointed lessons about respect and character that Brittany clearly needed to internalize. Their dignity contrasted sharply with her earlier arrogance, creating a powerful illustration of true class versus superficial status. Robert Chen approached Derek with obvious relief but also concern about their business relationship going forward. Derek, we need to discuss how this situation affects our other investor relationships and ongoing projects. Some of our partners witnessed tonight's events and will need to address their concerns about Blake Development's reputation. Derek nodded soberly. Robert, I understand that my personal failures have professional consequences for our entire company. I'm prepared to take full responsibility and do whatever necessary to rebuild trust with investors and partners. The conversation highlighted how Derek's family cruelty had broader implications beyond personal relationships. His treatment of me reflected character flaws that could undermine business partnerships and investor confidence in ways he was only beginning to understand. My parents approached with expressions of shame and determination that seemed more genuine than their earlier panic-driven apologies. Dad spoke first, his voice heavy with regret. Simone, your mother and I need to acknowledge that we failed you as parents in ways that go far beyond tonight's seating arrangements. We allowed Derek's achievements to overshadow yours, and we dismissed your dreams because they didn't fit our expectations for our daughter's life. Mom continued with tears streaming down her face. We were so worried about you taking risks that we never celebrated your courage. We were so focused on traditional success that we couldn't see the extraordinary business you were building. We robbed ourselves of years of pride in our daughter's accomplishments. Their apologies felt different from the earlier desperate attempts to salvage relationships with a newly discovered wealthy family member. They seemed to understand that their failures went deeper than misunderstanding my financial success. They had failed to value my character, determination, and vision. Aunt Margaret and my cousins formed a small group near the bar discussing how family dynamics would need to change to incorporate the reality of my success and their years of dismissive treatment. Tyler approached with genuine contrition. Simone, I want to apologize for treating your career as less important than mine and Jordan's corporate jobs. We bought into the family narrative that Derek was the only serious business person, and we never bothered to learn about what you were actually achieving. Jordan added, We'd like to understand your business better, not because we want jobs or favors, but because we want to be family members who actually know and appreciate each other's lives. Their interest seemed motivated by genuine desire for better relationships, rather than opportunistic networking, suggesting that some family bonds might be repairable with consistent effort and mutual respect. The Atlas executives completed their preliminary contract discussions and approached me with professional satisfaction. David spoke for the team. Ms. Harrison, we believe the modified partnership terms create appropriate accountability measures, while allowing Blake Development the opportunity to demonstrate character growth. The public commitments will serve as benchmarks for evaluating their progress toward meeting Atlas Construction's partnership standards. Linda added, The scholarship fund particularly aligns with our company's values regarding empowerment and opportunity creation. It transforms tonight's negative experience into something that will benefit other young women facing similar family discouragement. Marcus concluded with characteristic directness. We'll proceed with cautious optimism, but Blake Development's future with Atlas Construction depends entirely on their follow-through on tonight's commitments. The professional evaluation reflected confidence in my leadership while maintaining appropriate skepticism about Derek's ability to sustain the character changes he had promised under pressure. Mrs. Patterson approached with the warm smile I remembered from high school, her pride in my achievements genuine and uncomplicated by family drama or business considerations. Simone, watching you handle this situation with such grace and wisdom makes me even prouder of the young woman you've become. Your response tonight demonstrated exactly the kind of leadership our world needs. Her words provided emotional validation that felt separate from the business and family implications swirling around the reception hall. She had known me before Atlas Construction existed, and her pride was based on character rather than financial success. The evening was transforming from Derek and Brittany's wedding into something unprecedented, a public reckoning with family values, a business partnership born from crisis, and a demonstration of how power could be used for justice rather than revenge. But the real test of everyone's commitments would come in the weeks and months ahead when the promises made under pressure would need to become sustained changes in behavior and values. As news of the evening's dramatic revelations spread throughout the reception hall, the entire character of Derek's wedding celebration underwent a remarkable transformation. Guests who had been enjoying routine festivities suddenly found themselves witnessing something unprecedented, a real-time demonstration of accountability, forgiveness, and the power of authentic success. The Atlas Construction kitchen staff, led by Patricia, emerged with a specially prepared dessert presentation that had been hastily arranged to honor their CEO. The elegant chocolate sculpture featured the Atlas Construction logo surrounded by sugarwork depicting various building projects, creating an impromptu tribute that demonstrated more thoughtfulness than any family gesture I had received all evening. Ladies and gentlemen, Patricia announced to the reception hall, we wanted to take a moment to properly celebrate Ms. Simone Harrison, CEO of Atlas Construction, and the visionary leader who transformed this historic mansion into the beautiful venue where we're gathered tonight. The applause that followed was enthusiastic and genuine, coming from wedding guests who were finally understanding the full scope of my achievements. Several people approached to share stories about Atlas Construction projects they had encountered around Chicago, creating an organic celebration of work I had never been able to discuss with family members. Sarah Chen, my former high school classmate, approached with obvious amazement. Simone, I had no idea you owned the company that renovated my office building downtown. The craftsmanship was incredible, and everyone in our company constantly compliments the design. I can't believe Derek didn't know about your success. Michael Rodriguez joined the conversation with similar enthusiasm. The Atlas Construction Apprenticeship Program trained my nephew when he aged out of foster care. Your company gave him skills and confidence that completely changed his life trajectory. Why hasn't your family been celebrating this kind of community impact? Their recognition felt profoundly different from the desperate acknowledgments my relatives had offered minutes earlier. These were people discovering my achievements independently and expressing genuine appreciation for work that had touched their own lives. Mrs. Patterson gathered several other teachers from our high school who had been invited to the wedding, creating an impromptu reunion that focused entirely on celebrating my journey from ambitious student to successful entrepreneur. Simone always wrote about wanting to build things that would last longer than her lifetime, she told the group. Seeing her company's work around the city proves that some dreams do come true when they're pursued with determination and integrity. The contrast between my teacher's pride and my family's historical dismissiveness was striking. Educators who had known me for 4 years recognized and celebrated my potential more readily than relatives who had known me for my entire life. Derek approached the celebration with humility that seemed genuine rather than performance-based. He waited respectfully for a pause in conversation before addressing the group. I want everyone here to know that my sister's success didn't happen despite our family's lack of support. It happened because of her own vision, courage, and determination. I'm ashamed that it took tonight's crisis for me to publicly acknowledge what should have been obvious all along. His words carried to nearby guests, creating a moment of public accountability that went beyond the business requirements we had established. Derek was choosing to acknowledge his failures even when not required to do so, suggesting that his remorse might be deeper than desperate self-preservation. Brittany joined the group with her own contribution to the accountability moment. I want to apologize, not just to Simone, but to everyone who witnessed my behavior tonight. Treating anyone with disrespect, especially family members, reflects poorly on the values Harrison Blake taught me. I clearly lost sight of basic human decency in the stress of wedding planning. Her acknowledgement of family values ironically highlighted how her father's business success had apparently failed to instill respect for working people or appreciation for others' achievements. The Blake family wealth had created privilege without teaching responsibility. Local business leaders who had been invited to the wedding began approaching with expressions of interest and respect that Derek had probably hoped to generate through his fabricated family connections. Now they were meeting the actual Atlas Construction CEO under circumstances that demonstrated authentic character, rather than manufactured networking opportunities. James Morrison, president of the Chicago Construction Association, introduced himself with obvious professional enthusiasm. Ms. Harrison, Atlas Construction's safety record and worker satisfaction scores are among the highest in our industry. We've been hoping to invite you to speak at our annual conference about building inclusive workplace cultures. Eleanor Walsh, who served on the board of several nonprofit organizations, added her perspective. Your company's scholarship programs and community investment have created opportunities for hundreds of young people. The ripple effects of Atlas Construction's social responsibility work extend far beyond individual building projects. These conversations represented the kind of business relationships Derek had been desperately trying to cultivate, now happening organically, because guests were meeting someone whose reputation was built on actual achievements rather than fabricated connections. The wedding band, initially confused by the evening's dramatic turn of events, adapted by playing music that felt more appropriate for celebrating professional achievements than romantic milestones. Their selection of uplifting, empowering songs created a soundtrack for recognition and redemption, rather than traditional wedding festivities. Robert Chen approached with his wife, both looking relieved but also thoughtful about the lessons embedded in the evening's events. Simone, I want you to know that tonight changed my perspective on business partnerships and character evaluation. Blake Development will implement Atlas Construction's approach to assessing potential collaborators based on how they treat family members and employees. His commitment to adopting our evaluation methods suggested that the evening's impact would extend beyond Derek's immediate situation, potentially influencing how other companies approached ethical business practices. The transformation was perhaps most visible in my parents' behavior. Instead of their earlier desperate attempts to claim retroactive pride, they now sat quietly at their table engaging in what appeared to be serious conversation about their failures as parents and their need to understand their daughter's life more completely. When Mom finally approached, her demeanor was subdued and reflective. Simone, your father and I have been talking about how we can rebuild a genuine relationship with you based on who you actually are rather than who we thought you should be. We realize we need to educate ourselves about your work and interests instead of expecting you to conform to our expectations. Dad's contribution was equally thoughtful. We want to learn about Atlas construction not because you're successful, but because it's clearly important to you, and we've been terrible at understanding what matters to our own daughter. Their approach felt different from earlier panic-driven apologies because it focused on their need to change rather than my obligation to forgive. They seemed to understand that rebuilding trust would require sustained effort on their part. As the evening progressed, Derek and Brittany's wedding had become something entirely unprecedented, a celebration of authentic achievement, a demonstration of accountability in action, and a masterclass in how power could be exercised with both justice and mercy. 6 months after that extraordinary wedding night, I sat in my Atlas construction office, reviewing quarterly reports that exceeded every projection we had made for company growth. The Blake Development Partnership had not only succeeded beyond our initial expectations, but had become a model for how character-based business relationships could create extraordinary results. Derek's public acknowledgement of my achievements and his commitment to changed behavior had transformed our family dynamic in ways none of us could have anticipated. The brother who had dismissed my dreams for 3 years had become one of Atlas Construction's most effective advocates, speaking publicly about the importance of supporting women entrepreneurs and the dangers of underestimating family members based on traditional gender roles. His company had implemented comprehensive respect and dignity policies for all workers, creating a workplace culture that attracted top talent and generated impressive client satisfaction scores. Blake Development's commitment to ethical practices had earned recognition from industry associations and led to partnership opportunities with other values-driven companies. Brittany's transformation had been equally remarkable. Her genuine embarrassment about treating service workers disrespectfully had motivated her to become an advocate for dignified employment practices in the hospitality industry. She had joined boards of organizations supporting fair wages and respectful treatment for catering staff, hotel workers, and other service professionals. Her wedding planning business launched with skills developed through our reconciliation process, specialized in creating celebrations that honored all participants, regardless of their roles or positions. Brittany had become known for events where vendors and staff received the same consideration as guests, creating positive working environments that produced exceptional results. The Blake Development condominium project had exceeded sales projections by 40%, with buyers specifically attracted to the ethical construction practices and community investment commitments embedded in the development process. The partnership between Blake Development and Atlas Construction had created a new standard for responsible luxury construction that other companies were beginning to emulate. My parents had fulfilled their commitment to understanding my work by enrolling in a community college course about small business development and construction management. Dad had become surprisingly knowledgeable about sustainable building practices, while Mom had volunteered to mentor other women launching construction companies through our scholarship program. Their genuine effort to comprehend my professional life had rebuilt our relationship on foundations of mutual respect rather than parental expectations. Family gatherings now featured conversations where everyone's achievements received equal attention and support, creating the inclusive dynamic I had always hoped for but never experienced. The Simone Harrison Scholarship Fund had already supported 15 young women entering construction trades, with several recipients now working as apprentices for Atlas Construction and partner companies. The scholarship program had generated media attention that brought additional qualified applicants and donor support, expanding our ability to create opportunities for women facing family discouragement, similar to what I had experienced. Aunt Margaret and my cousins had become reliable sources of emotional support and professional networking relationships that had developed naturally once the family hierarchy shifted to recognize actual achievements rather than perceived status. Tyler had eventually joined Atlas Construction as a project manager, bringing corporate experience that enhanced our administrative capabilities while learning construction management skills that expanded his career options. The Atlas Construction Charity Gala, where my family had appeared as my guests, had become an annual tradition that strengthened both our business relationships and personal bonds. Watching Derek and my parents celebrate my achievements publicly had provided emotional closure for years of dismissive treatment while demonstrating their commitment to permanent behavior change. Mrs. Patterson had become a member of our scholarship selection committee, using her educational background to identify promising candidates and providing mentorship that helped recipients succeed academically and professionally. Her involvement had brought other educators into our support network, creating pipeline programs that introduced construction careers to high school students. The wedding venue where everything had changed had become a symbol of transformation rather than trauma. Patricia and I had developed a friendship that extended beyond professional relationships, and the catering company now provided services for Atlas construction events, creating ongoing partnerships based on mutual respect and shared values. Robert Chen and Blake Development had adopted our character evaluation methods for all their business relationships, creating a network of ethical companies that prioritized integrity over profit margins. Their success with values-driven partnerships had influenced other developers to implement similar screening processes, gradually raising industry standards. The most surprising development had been Derek's genuine pride in my achievements, extending beyond his business interests. He had become a vocal advocate for women entrepreneurs in construction, speaking at conferences and mentoring other men whose unconscious bias undermined their female family members' career aspirations. His marriage to Brittany had strengthened as they built a partnership based on shared values of respect, accountability, and community service, rather than superficial status and social climbing. Their relationship had become a model for how couples could grow together through crisis and commitment to character development. The Atlas Construction Company culture had been enriched by the experience of witnessing leadership that balanced justice with mercy, demonstrating that success could be achieved without compromising integrity or abandoning family relationships. Our employee satisfaction scores and retention rates had improved as staff saw that our values were genuine rather than marketing rhetoric. Industry recognition for Atlas Construction's ethical practices had generated business opportunities that exceeded the financial benefits of the Blake Development contract. Companies sought partnerships with us specifically because our reputation for character-based decision-making aligned with their own values, creating a competitive advantage based on integrity rather than lowest pricing. The transformation had required consistent effort from everyone involved, but the results had exceeded our most optimistic expectations. Family relationships that had been damaged by years of dismissive treatment were now stronger than they had ever been, built on foundations of genuine understanding and mutual respect. Derek's development company had become profitable beyond his original projections, proving that ethical business practices could generate superior financial results when implemented consistently. His success had validated the principles Atlas Construction had always maintained about the connection between character and competence. As I reviewed these remarkable developments from my office overlooking downtown Chicago, I realized that the evening which had begun as the worst night of my family life had become the foundation for transformation that benefited everyone involved. The wedding crisis had forced accountability that might never have occurred under normal circumstances, creating opportunities for growth that voluntary change had never achieved. The experience had taught me that forgiveness could be both strategic and healing, that power exercised with wisdom could create positive change for multiple generations, and that family relationships could be rebuilt when all parties committed to sustained effort and genuine character development. 2 years after that unforgettable wedding night, I stood before 300 business leaders at the Chicago Chamber of Commerce annual conference sharing the story that had become legendary in our city's entrepreneurial community. The speech had been requested specifically because the tale of family rejection business crisis and ultimate redemption offered lessons that extended far beyond individual success. The evening that changed everything for my family began with a seating chart. I told the audience, many of whom had heard versions of the story, but wanted to understand the deeper principles at work. I thought I was experiencing the worst humiliation of my life. Instead, I was witnessing the most important character test any of us would ever face. The audience listened with rapt attention as I described the 3-year experiment of hiding my success to discover whether my family could love me without knowing about my wealth. The concept of testing relationships through adversity resonated with leaders who had faced similar challenges in balancing personal authenticity with professional achievement. Atlas Construction's success gave me power over Derek's future, but the real question was what kind of person I would choose to be when I held that power. Revenge would have felt satisfying for a moment, but building character creates value that lasts for generations. Derek sat in the front row with Brittany and my parents, their presence a testament to the transformation that had continued long after our initial reconciliation. His development company had become one of Chicago's most respected firms, known for ethical practices and community investment that created lasting value rather than quick profits. The Blake Development Apprenticeship Program, modeled after Atlas Construction's approach, had trained over 100 young people in construction trades with particular focus on supporting candidates from families that discouraged non-traditional career paths. Derek's public advocacy for women in construction had influenced other male executives to examine their own unconscious biases. The most important lesson wasn't about forgiveness or family dynamics. I continued addressing the business audience directly. It was about the power of character-based decision-making in every aspect of life. How we treat people when we think they can't affect our success reveals who we really are. Brittany had become a successful event planner whose business model prioritized dignified treatment of all workers, creating celebrations that honored everyone involved, rather than exploiting service providers for wealthy clients' convenience. Her company's reputation for ethical practices had generated waiting lists of both clients and vendors who wanted to participate in respectful working relationships. Atlas Construction's partnership evaluation process isn't just about avoiding bad business relationships. It's about creating community networks where success lifts everyone rather than stepping on others. When we partner with companies that share our values, we strengthen the entire industry. My parents had fulfilled their commitment to understanding my work by completing certification programs in construction management and small business development. Dad had become a volunteer mentor for our scholarship program, while Mom had joined the board of a nonprofit supporting women entrepreneurs. Their genuine effort to comprehend my professional life had created the inclusive family dynamic I had always wanted. The scholarship fund that emerged from our family crisis has now supported over 60 young women entering construction careers. What began as accountability has become opportunity creation that will impact multiple generations. Character-based decisions create ripple effects that extend far beyond immediate circumstances. Tyler had advanced to senior project manager at Atlas Construction, bringing corporate experience that enhanced our operations while learning specialized skills that expanded his career options. His success had influenced Jordan to leave his corporate job and start a consulting company focused on helping businesses implement ethical workplace practices. 6 months after Derek's wedding, his business partner told me that our character evaluation process had been adopted by every company in their network. Now, they evaluate potential partnerships based on how candidates treat their family's employees and service providers. Ethical behavior has become a competitive advantage. Robert Chen had expanded this approach throughout his professional network, creating a coalition of Chicago businesses that prioritized integrity over profit maximization. Their collective success had attracted national attention to character-based business practices, influencing policy discussions about corporate responsibility and ethical leadership. The most unexpected outcome was discovering that justice and mercy aren't opposing forces. When we hold people accountable while offering paths to redemption, we create opportunities for a transformation that benefits everyone involved. Derek didn't just save his business. He became the brother I always hoped he could be. The Atlas Construction Company culture had been strengthened by witnessing leadership that balanced accountability with forgiveness, proving that our values weren't just marketing rhetoric, but genuine principles that guided difficult decisions. Employee satisfaction and retention rates had reached industry-leading levels as staff saw authentic integrity in action. Mrs. Patterson, my high school English teacher, told me that the best stories teach us something about ourselves. The night I sat in that kitchen, I thought I was learning about my family's capacity for cruelty. Instead, I discovered my own capacity for leadership that creates positive change. Mrs. Patterson sat near the middle of the audience, her presence a reminder that teachers often recognize potential that families overlook. Her involvement in our scholarship selection process had helped identify promising candidates while providing mentorship that enhanced their chances for success. Atlas Construction is now recognized as one of Chicago's most ethical employers, not because we avoid difficult decisions, but because we make them based on character rather than convenience. Our reputation for integrity has generated business opportunities that exceed what we could have achieved through cutting corners or compromising values. The industry recognition had created competitive advantages that proved ethical business practices could generate superior financial results when implemented consistently. Companies sought partnerships with us specifically because our character-based approach aligned with their own values, creating premium pricing opportunities for integrity-driven services. The wedding that began with exclusion became the foundation for inclusion that transformed multiple families and businesses. When we choose growth over grudges, we create success that's measured in relationships rather than just revenue. Aunt Margaret and my cousins had become reliable sources of both personal support and professional networking relationships that had developed naturally once family dynamics shifted to recognize actual achievements rather than superficial status. Their authentic pride in my work had healed wounds I hadn't realized still needed attention. Derek's marriage to Brittany has become stronger because they built their partnership on shared values rather than social status. Their relationship demonstrates how couples can grow together through crisis when they're committed to character development rather than image management. Their commitment to community service and ethical business practices had created a marriage that served as a model for other young couples, proving that relationships built on authentic values could withstand challenges that destroyed partnerships based on superficial attraction or financial convenience. The Blake Development Project exceeded all financial projections because ethical construction practices attracted buyers who were willing to pay premium prices for integrity-driven development. Community investment and worker respect became competitive advantages rather than cost burdens. The success had influenced other developers to implement similar ethical standards, gradually raising industry practices while proving that character-based business approaches could generate superior profits when consistently applied across all operations. Looking back, I realized that the kitchen where I ate leftovers was actually the most powerful place in the building. Kitchens are where real work gets done, where authentic relationships are built, and where character is revealed. Sometimes being excluded from the wrong table puts us exactly where we belong. The audience of business leaders absorbed these lessons with visible engagement, many taking notes about implementing character evaluation processes in their own companies and personal relationships. The story had become a case study in ethical leadership that business schools were beginning to incorporate into their curricula. The most important question isn't what we do when we have power, but who we become when we're tested. Atlas Construction's success isn't measured just in buildings completed or profits generated, but in lives changed and communities strengthened. That's what sustainable success looks like. As I concluded the presentation, I looked out at an audience that included family members, business partners, scholarship recipients, and community leaders whose lives had been touched by the ripple effects of decisions made during one extraordinary evening. I want to close by asking you a question that could change everything about how you approach both business and family relationships. How do you treat people when you think they can't affect your success? Your answer to that question reveals more about your character than any achievement on your resume. The audience erupted in sustained applause, but more importantly, I could see reflection and recognition in faces throughout the room. People were understanding that character-based decision-making wasn't just about ethical behavior. It was about creating sustainable success that lasted beyond individual achievements. After the presentation, dozens of business leaders approached with questions about implementing character evaluation processes, establishing scholarship programs, and building company cultures based on authentic values rather than profit maximization. The conversation had inspired action that would extend the evening's lessons to countless other organizations and families. Derek and my parents joined me on the stage for the closing recognition, their presence a testament to relationships that had been rebuilt on foundations of mutual respect and genuine understanding. The family that had once treated me as an embarrassment now stood proudly beside me as I received recognition for leadership that prioritized character over convenience. The final lesson had become clear through 2 years of sustained change. True success isn't about proving ourselves to people who underestimate us. It's about becoming the kind of people who lift others while we climb, who create opportunities while we achieve, and who build relationships based on who people can become rather than who they've been. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where your family or colleagues underestimated your potential or treated your dreams as less important than theirs? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below about how you've handled those challenges and what you've learned about character, forgiveness, and the power of staying true to your values, even when others don't recognize your worth. If this story resonated with you, please like this video to help others discover these lessons about turning adversity into opportunity. Subscribe to our channel for more stories about entrepreneurship, family dynamics, and building success with integrity. And don't forget to share this with someone who might need encouragement to pursue their dreams despite family discouragement or professional skepticism. Thank you for taking this journey with me, and remember, sometimes the kitchen table is exactly where we need to be to discover our own power and learn what real character looks like in action. Here's to building success that creates opportunities for others and relationships that last longer than any business achievement.